Dear students, welcome to our course on regional organizations. In this video, I'm going to introduce you the third chapter of our textbook on regional organizations, which is dealing with United Nations and regionalism. This chapter has four main learning objectives. So after you finish this chapter, you will be able to explain the historical and normative background of the issue of regionalism. You can explain the relationship between the globalism and regionalism and the problems of the definition regarding the concepts of related to regionalism. You can also define and enumerate the electoral groups and regional commissions. Finally, you will be able to analyze collaboration between the United Nations and regional organizations for maintaining international peace and security. So this chapter has three main titles. The first is dealing with the historical and normative background. The second one is dealing with regions in the United Nations. And the final title, explains maintenance of international peace and security. So let's start with the historical and normative background. In fact, the historical background or political regionalism dates back to the 1930s, particularly in the American continent. So the first example of the rise of political regionalism can be found in Latin America with the signing of the Act of Chapultepec. And also another example from the 30s can be the creation of the Arab League in the Middle East. However, the regional initiatives of South American countries failed to falling under the UN jurisdictions after the 1945, because Yalta Conference created a new formula, a formula of universal membership and preventing effective regional measures. So in other words, creation of the United Nations became an obstacle to the strengthening of regional initiatives emerge in South American countries, among South American countries. And finally, although United Nations led to the creation of universal membership and preventing effective regional measures, the UN Charter explicitly recognized regionalism under the 18th section of the Charter, but still the Charter lacks a clear definition of regional arrangements and agencies. On the other hand, the UN system recognizes regional systems mainly by two different mechanisms. The first one is the collective resort to the right of self-defense. In other words, regional organizations or arrangements and agencies can collectively resort to the self-defense, to the right of self-defense. And the second one is the priority of regional arrangements in the peaceful settlement of disputes. This is the second main mechanisms of regionalism in the UN system. Another topic or another issue is the issue of definition. Regions refers to subsystems of international system, but they are not strictly geographical. They need to refer some sort of geographical affiliation, but they are not strictly geographical. They imply non-universal membership with a smaller number of member states. They aim at pursuing and promoting common goals in one or more areas in a particular region. And also, regional agencies, different from regional arrangements. In some cases, regional arrangements for instance, can not have organizational structures, but regional agencies, such as, for instance, like European Union, must have a organizational structure. Chapter 8 of the UN Charter applies to only regional organizations which are founded for preserving peace and security in the region. So in other words, regional organizations created other than these military or peace and security purposes cannot be considered under the UN Charter Chapter 8. So collective defense organizations like NATO, these are different in terms of this collective security or different from regional organizations founded for preserving peace and security in the region, but United Nations Security Council can generally consider these collective defense organizations like NATO for the authorization of the use of force under Article 53. So the cooperation between EU and regional organizations generally includes peacekeeping, social and economic development, humanitarian aid, and human rights. These are the main areas of cooperation between regional organizations and United Nations. So the second topic refers to the regions in the United Nations. There are regional groupings, regional commissions, and regional principles. They reflect a general trend within the UN practice in general. So there are 5 regional organizations, or in other words, electoral groups, which took shape in the 60s to achieve fair representation of member states in UN Security Council and in other UN bodies. These 5 regional groups represent Africa, Asia Pacific, Eastern Europe, Latin America and Caribbean, Western Europe, and other states. These divisions and groupings or their memberships are not based on only regional representations, but they are rather political. For instance, Israel, Australia, and New Zealand are participating in the group of Western Europe and other states. Although they are geographically located outside the Western Europe and other states. For instance, Cyprus administration, or the South Cyprus, is located in Asia Pacific, although it's part of Europe. So these the purposes of the main aim of, or the reason for these groupings, is to allocate seats on the UN bodies such as Economic and Social Council or other UN principal bodies more fairly, more equitably. Also, UNICEF, World Bank, or World Meteorological organization have its own regional groupings. But in general, there is no room for regional voting due to the intergovernmental structure of the United Nations. And finally, under Economic and Social Council, there are 5 regional commissions were established to deal with or to achieve different purposes such as regional development and cooperation. So finally, in terms of maintenance of international peace and security, the first debate is about regional enforcement action, or in other words, the use of force, military force. Of course, the UN Charter gives priority to regional arrangements and agencies in solving local disputes before referring them to the Security Council. So the UN Charter provides some sort of legal basis. But there are some certain characteristics are required for a regional organization in order to qualify these criteria for regional enforcement action. So they should have smaller number of member states than UN. They should be territorially linked, and they should list keeping peace and security as one of their main tasks, and they should function in conformity with the UN principles and purposes. Then UN Security Council can authorize enforcement action under Chapter 8. There are 2 forms of cooperation in terms of regional enforcement action, peace enforcement action we can call. First example can be the initiation of a military action by the United Security Council, and then regional organizations can participate, can complement, or can implement this decision. The second form can be an autonomous action by regional organizations with or before the UN Security Council authorization. So in this case, there are some debates that this is not an authorization. This can be only an approval. And there are some examples, for instance, like in Africa, the military action in Liberia started before the UN Security Council authorization. Another topic regarding international peace and security is the regional organizations' functions in this area. So there's a new idea or principle which is called regional solutions to regional problems. So these regional initiatives, arrangements, agencies, and their solutions are promoted and encouraged to solve regional problems, particularly after the end of the Cold War. And this, especially after the UN failures in Somalia and Bosnia, regional organizations are generally authorized to use force. For instance, in Africa, African Union, or in Europe, or in the Balkans, European Union or NATO are authorized to use force. The last topic is cooperation in peacekeeping operations. Particularly after the 1990, there's an increasing trend in peacekeeping operations by regional organizations with UN, and there is also a general trend in the increase in the number of peacekeeping operations. For instance, European Union and African Union emerge as leading organizations in helping these peacekeeping organizations. There are different forms of cooperation between UN and regional organizations in terms of peacekeeping organizations. For instance, UN mission can be launched with regional mission, or can be complemented with a regional mission or mission of a regional organization. UN mission can be complemented with regional civilian mission, or they can organize a joint peacekeeping operation. So this is the end of the third chapter. Thank you very much for your participation, but please go and read your book, because this is a very brief introduction, a very brief explanation for the chapter. So the main learning material is your textbook. Thank you very much.